To read Back to Reality, the best-selling novel of the bestseller experiment by the two Marks, go to bestsellerexperiment.com/back to reality.
And subscribe to this podcast to get loads of extra bonuses. Go to bestsellerexperiment.com/subscribe. Let's run the show. BJ, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark. Thank you for inviting me.
It's so wonderful to talk with you because I've been actually following your work for quite a few years.
Wow.
And I'm so excited to see your book coming out. And I'm actually even more excited than the book coming out. I was so excited to read on your Twitter the other day that it hit the New York Times bestseller list.
Imagine that. Wow.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How does that feel?
Awesome. Okay, so here I was just going to speak in the Harvard bookstore, and I'm sitting in a little cafe close by, and I got the news, and I was just ready to cry. I hate to admit that out of the gate, but it's like, I'm in public. I'm not going to break down and cry. I've got to go in and read in the Harvard bookstore. It's something. It signifies that the book can reach lots of people. And I think that's, for me, why it was like such a big moment. It's like, oh my gosh, I made the list. Wow.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. And it's been such a long journey. I mean, not just from the book's perspective, right? But also if you look back at everything that you've done with the, at Stanford with the behavior lab. I mean, how many years has this been a journey? What does this kind of milestone mean to you?
It depends how you count it. I mean, certainly 20 years looking at human behavior from, as a behavior scientist, the last 9 or so years specifically on habits. And in 2011, that's when I started teaching Tiny Habits to the public for free, which I still do, free 5-day program. And then people immediately started saying, where's your book? Where's your book? 2012, 2000, where's your book? And it's like, no, I'm still researching. I'm still discovering, right? And so fast forward, I stopped counting after I'd coached 40,000 people personally through email. So lots and lots. And so delighted to have brought that work and my broader work of behavior design together in this one book, Tiny Habits. So a lot, actually. So it's a big deal in my life and my career.
It's pretty amazing because in the book you talk about aspirations. And when I was reading that, I was thinking to myself, this is the aspiration ultimately for so many people to actually be able to take everything they've learned and be able to share it in a really digestible way. So tell me the story about Costco, the Costco moment.
Oh, fast forward, like how it got into Costco or my experience seeing it at Costco?
Well, no, when you were standing in Costco the other day.
Okay, so I am so glad you asked this because nobody's asked me this. So the pub date, it's like New Year's Eve and it's like, fine. But then I hear from my sister that she saw it in Costco about a week early. And I'm like, what? So I'm here in Maui at that time, where I live part-time. So I go into the Maui Costco thinking, well, it's not going to be here because things take so long to get to the islands and the book's not supposed to be out anyway till New Year's Eve. And I walk in and there's my book, stacks of my book. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And there's one person standing by the books and it's a woman and she's flipping through my book of all things. So I walk up to her and, I think I just come in from the ocean. I'm a mess. My hair is every which way. And I just walk up and I say, that's a good book. And she said, well, have you read it? And I was like, well, I wrote it. And she's like, what? And I turned the book over my pictures and I was like, yeah, I'm the author. She's like, you're kidding me. And she says, will you sign it? And it's like, yeah. And then another woman hears and comes over. I mean, so first I see my book at Costco, which is this moment. And then you have this funny interaction that couldn't have been scripted better, I think, of somebody, kind of revealing yourself as the author, all coming together. So that was funny and interesting and certainly memorable.
That's brilliant. I think actually secretly every single author dreams of that moment.
Okay, so you can manufacture it in a certain way. Let me add to the rest of the story. So I was there at Costco to get books for my friends here in Maui. So I load up my cart with like 20 books or 30 books or something, a lot. And I'm walking toward the checkout and a person goes, whoa, that must be a good book. And I was like, well, how do you say, like, I'm the author? And I get to the checkout stand, same thing. And then somebody standing in line. So I was they ask and I tell them, yeah, this is my book. It just came out. So they run back and get their own copy and I sign it right there. And the checkout people were all like excited and we take pictures. So it was kind of this, it is kind of the fantasy, isn't it?
It is. So you weren't doing Wayne Dyer's trick all those years ago where he went and bought every single copy of his book up and actually...
no, that was not my trick. No,
because was a fellow Maui resident, I believe.
Yeah. There's a few of us hidden away here, but my friends really did appreciate getting a copy from me, and I signed it to them, and it was fun. It was really great.
What's with the publishers not giving you a massive load of books?
But they did. But they're in California. They're in California.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
And I also gave a bunch away to neighbors in California.
Perfect. I think it's one of the best things. It's like growing your own veg, isn't it? It's like, there's nothing better. There's nothing better than going next door and giving them some of your surplus.
Do you know, and so I have a crew out here that I surf with every morning. And while writing the book, I did not talk about the book or my work. We're out there surfing, and mostly you're there for the waves. And I acknowledged them in the book, in the acknowledgments. They didn't know that. And so once the book's out, so this is part of what I did with the Costco books, is I then circled their names in the acknowledgments. And I told them out on the way, it's like, hey, I wrote a book and you're in it. I acknowledge you. And that was a blast because, I'm out on the waves every morning just to like connect with nature and be active and not to talk shop necessarily. If people ask, I explain a little bit, but so to do the reveal out there and then put the book on their car, hand them to they're, showering off of the hose. That was a blast too.
That's superb. That's such a brilliant idea. I love it. And let's talk about the book, because the book Tiny Habits, it's a very different approach. I've read a lot of books on habits. I've practiced. I'm a habit ninja. That's what we call people in the book. I've been doing this all my life with a lot of my own kind of private and workout in many different areas. And I'm a convert when it comes to the whole idea of habits. But I loved how your book has taken a very, very different approach to what I would say would be the standard message that we keep getting time and time again. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about the actual Fogg method. Yeah. Obviously, you break it down brilliantly. And that, one must say, is the book is very easy to read for something that just obviously sounds simple, but actually the underlying effect is incredibly complicated in terms of the benefit it brings. So tell us a bit about the Fogg method. How did that come?
Thank you. Yeah, what I share in my book is very different than the traditional approach. And it's a little bit hard to get people to understand that. Like, oh, I've read a book on habits, so yours is more the same. It's like, no. This is it's all based on my research, and it's new and it's different. And some of it goes against the traditional advice of how to change your behavior, because that doesn't work very well. Let's see, I'll do a quick summary. In the Tiny Habits method, you take any new habit you want and you shrink it down so it's super, super small, almost as small as you can go. So if you want to read more, rather than saying I'm going to read a chapter a day, you make it super tiny. Maybe you read a paragraph. Maybe you go even smaller, just a sentence. There was a summer where all I did was open a book. That was the habit, just open the book to my next place. So you make it that small. And then after that, you say, okay, where does this fit naturally in my life? So you look for where in your routine will this new habit just slide in naturally. So flossing fits naturally after you brush. With my reading habit, it fit naturally after I sat down on my patio in California. Our home overlooks a river. So after I sit down, I will open the book. And then the third hack is you cause the habit to form by firing off a positive emotion deliberately. So you're self-reinforcing through a technique that I call celebration. And that's anything you do that causes a positive emotion on demand. So you can do a fist pump and go, way to go, Beej, or you can raise your arms. With my reading, let me keep going with the reading one. I'd made a bookmark with a cute little smiley face on it. So when I opened up the book, I would see the bookmark with the smiley face and I would feel like happy and successful. And the reason for that is because emotions create habits. It's not repetition, it's emotion. So if you're good at firing off a positive emotion as you're doing the new behavior, then you're wiring the habit into your brain. So that's a quick summary of the Tiny Habits method. Of course, there's a lot more because there's 300 pages in the book, but that's the 2.5 minute version.
Brilliant. That's the Twitter version. I love it.
Extended Twitter version.
But the thing is, the fact that you can summarize it in that way shows really the simplicity of what you're teaching, which is about simplifying habits in order to make them something that will stick. You talk about in the book about growing roots, and I love that analogy. Talk a bit about that idea of the tree and the roots with habits.
Yeah. So, one great way to think about habits are like plants, and your collection of habits, like a garden of different plants, shrubs and flowers. And I'm here in Maui and I'm looking out, I'm seeing palm trees and grass and flowers and bushes. And the roots are how firmly the habit is planted into your life or into your brain. And what's on top is the manifestation. So are you walking, are you flossing one tooth? Are you flossing all your teeth? And in tiny habits, what you do first is you care about the roots. You want to get the habit firmly rooted. And listeners who know a lot about gardening know that that's what matters in gardening. It doesn't matter if you have this super tall sunflower. If the roots are really shallow, guess what? It's going to get upended. And so in tiny habits, you don't care about how big the habit is. In fact, keeping it tiny makes it easier to then root it in, get the roots really solid, wire the habit into your routine, and then you can grow it to be bigger if that's what you want. And so it turns out that plants are a really, really good analogy for how habits work in our life and how we design them or we don't design them and weeds grow. And Mark, and this is part of in the book, I wanted to extend that analogy quite a lot, but my editors were like, no, too much.
Don't overdo it. Yeah,
don't overdo it. But it is a very helpful analogy. There's enough of it in the book to help people get it.
Yeah, no, it really stuck with me. And as an avid gardener, I totally got it as well. It really made sense. And the thing that was the kind of breakthrough moment for me was this idea that it's not about how much you achieve doing the habit initially. Mm-hmm. It's more about just showing up and doing that one action. And that's the thing that makes the roots strong. You don't get extra roots growing if you do an hour or worse, if you try and do a whole day of it. And that was the bit that really landed for me. Now, obviously with our audience being writers, we've seen some really interesting things happening. You know about the 200 word a day challenge, the BXP 2020. And we specifically set up that experiment to make it so easy for people. Like literally 15 minutes a day is what it takes. And the reason being that 200 words is a page a day on average. And if you do it every day for a year, you end up at the end of the year with a book, 73,000 words. And its simplicity, I think, is what makes it work. But here's the interesting thing. Having run the experiment, we're noticing that some people that signed up are still not able to do the 200 words. And it's starting to make me think, having just read your book as well, it's not that people don't know how to write. The problem is sitting in the chair or getting their arse in the chair, as one of our Irish authors told us. So taking that idea with tiny habits, what do you think's going on there?
Well, you mean the people that aren't doing the 200 words or the many people who are? I mean,
no, I'm more interested in people who are not doing it, because I think that's where the big problem, I think, lies.
Well, it might be for some people that 200 is still too big. It does take, in the tiny habits method, you scale it back so small that even on days that you're busy or sick or just not in the mood, you can still do it, because it's about consistency. And so even 8 years now that I've been flossing all my teeth twice a day, so my dentist and hygienist love me. But on days when I'm super in a rush or just maybe it's really late at night, I just floss one tooth and I am done and I am successful. So in tiny habits, yes, you start small. The habit will naturally grow just like plants. But on days when you're just not up to it, you just do the tiniest version of it and it's still a success. So by keeping expectations low, setting the bar low and not raising the bar on yourself, you set yourself up for success every day, being consistent. And so it might be just opening your word processor. It might be 20 words, or it might just be, write 2 words. Now, I have some specific tricks that I've used or habits I've used in writing, but that's how I would look at people that aren't doing the 200 words a day. Maybe it still feels too big. And so I will officially, Mark, you can correct me, I will officially give those people permission. All you have to do is write 2 words, and they don't even have to make sense. Write the 2 words, say good for me, close it up, and the next day get back to it.
One day they might write 2 words, and those words could be the end. Right?
Well done.
So that's the thing. I'd love to have that day where it's just that those are the only 2 words. You're right. And actually, funny enough, a lot of our listeners, they will post us. That's the image they send us. They send us their word processor with, I've done it. And they just send us a picture that says the end.
I hope you have a wall right there that I'm not seeing in the video that I'm looking at, where you put those up as like, those are successes, like a trophy case of people sending you those 2 words.
It's utterly brilliant. It feels like it must be similar to you when you see one of your students, like, for example, Mike Krieger.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we haven't mentioned this yet, but one of your students, Mike, tell us about his journey, because obviously he did your course and then wanted to do something quite special, didn't he?
Yeah, spoiler alert. So Mike Krieger is the co-founder of Instagram. And in 2007, he was a student in my Stanford class. And this was before iPhone and before apps. And in my teaching, I do a lot of projects and exploration. And the exploration was that, hey, these things we call phones will one day be able to take pictures and share them. That's not yet, but it will be, and come up with a positive use for this technology. And so all students worked in teams of 3, and Mike and his teammates came up with a concept called Send the Sunshine, Fast Forward, Instagram. And it wasn't a direct line. After he graduated, he did another startup that wasn't working, and then he pivoted and went to the photo sharing idea. And the key there, and then this is the connection, is simplicity. The reason I've long been a huge advocate of simplicity, I preach it in my classes, I point out the thing that works for people, whether it's a technology or anything you want others to do, is simplicity. Make it really, really easy. Then when it came in 2009 and 10, when I was focusing on habits, it was still like, if I make it so simple to put on sunscreen, just 1 drop. If I make it so simple to floss, just 1 tooth. If I make it so simple to do push-ups, just 2, simplicity changes the behavior. So there's definitely a parallel between what in the early days led Instagram to succeed and how people succeed with behavior change and what's in tiny habits.
Which is brilliant. And you drew that conclusion in the book where you talked about how Google, Amazon, all of these companies now that are these incredibly massive companies and world-changing companies all started with a simple idea, Twitter being another.
And almost in some cases, I haven't added this up and done the math or the calculations, but in many cases anyway, it was so simple that the experts thought it was stupid. The experts criticized Twitter. They criticized Google's little search box. They thought Instagram lacked features. And so same thing with habits. People are like, oh no, I have to have big changes. So I have to have big habits. And it's like, no, that's how you get big, as you start tiny.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, again, you talked about, and this is probably the biggie for all of our listeners. The biggest reason why the 80% of people who want to write a book, if you do the research, there's 80% of people, if you ask 10 friends, 8 of them will say they want to write a book. The aspiration there is to write. But actually, the number of people that actually start the book is tiny. And even as a percentage of that, the number of people that finish a book is minuscule, even though there's 1.6 million books released each year on Amazon. That's a minuscule amount of books published compared to the number of people who actually want to write a book. And one of the reasons why I believe is because the book it feels like a mammoth. It feels like that enormous quest. Now, you talk about aspirations and not goals in the book. How would you apply that to the idea of writing a book as an aspiration rather than a goal?
Yeah. So aspiration and goal can mean the same thing. Goal, though, is an ambiguous word. So I say, let's not use it. Let's use aspiration. And so the aspiration to, have a book, but the aspiration could also be shifted of, I want to help people have happier lives, or I want to help people change their, eco behaviors so we can save the planet or whatever. And then those are actually different aspirations. So in my book, in behavior design, the first step is to clarify your aspiration. Is it really about a book that's printed, or is it about impact in the world, or is it something else? Or it could be a combination. But, take a little bit of time and get clear on what is it that you really want. Because if you can get clear on your aspiration, then everything gets easier. Because if you're trying to get yourself to do something you don't really want, then that's hard. That's a losing path.
Yeah, absolutely. And almost people are defeated before they even start. So really, one of the things that people need to ask themselves when they're thinking about writing a book is they need to ask themselves, what's the reason behind the reason?
Yeah, I think so. And I don't have other people have methods for really getting clear on that. But even just 2 to 3 minutes of going, okay, what is it that I really want? What's the aspiration? You may see, and I don't want to discourage people from writing books, but you may, if it's really about, I want to have positive impact on planet Earth, there may be other ways of doing that better than a book, or at least more in the near term. I did so many talks, so many industry talks, so many, my Twitter account is only about behavior change. It's not about the Super Bowl or pizza or anything. Just so much sharing. I know.
Well, no dinner shots?
No.
PJ, come on. We want to see what you have for dinner.
This is one tip I would encourage people to do. If you have a general area that you think could be a book, then have a Twitter account that's only for that area, or modify your current and just make it really pure for just that. And people that are interested will find you as you start putting value into the world. And those are the early readers of your book. Those are the champions. So you're actually you're doing 2 things. One, you're getting good at expressing or conveying the ideas in just a handful of characters. And then 2, you're seeing how people respond to it. And then 3, you're building an audience or even champions. And all that can happen if just through Twitter, and doing a tweet is no big deal. And you're not on any schedule. You can tweet a lot or just tweet a little bit. So I do think it's a good way to get moving forward that doesn't feel overwhelming.
And again, another idea of just simplifying the process by not trying to be all things to all people and be on 3 different social networks and all the things that we see that are kind of, I think, complicating our world. And it's so lovely to hear this message of simplicity, but for habits. Now, one of the other things that I find fascinating is you look at people in the world who are change makers. You've got people like, you've got the Musks of this world, and sending rockets up to Mars potentially, and founding PayPal and Tesla, and you've got the Bransons of this world who are running thousands of companies, it seems. Because I look at people that manage to accomplish so much in their day and so much in their life, which is what I'm interested in, that kind of idea of what we're here for and what we can contribute to the world. But every single one of those people have got the same number of hours in the day. Yeah. Have you drawn any conclusions around how much of those people's output and incredible service to the world is based on their habits and how they run their day?
Oh, I've seen figures, and I think those are just nobody. I mean, it's very hard to even define habit clearly. So any numbers around that are not going to be accurate. But yes, certainly our habits lead to the outcomes. And the other piece of the puzzle, yes, it's habits, but it's also prioritizing. And it's one of my most important habits is I have this way of prioritizing. So what people see on the surface are things usually that I'm succeeding at, that I've prioritized. What they're not seeing are all those things that didn't make the cut. And sometimes, often, that's really painful. It's like, I can't do that, or I'm not going to be able to do that. Or so, prioritizing really hard, making that just part of how you live your life, and then having these habits where you are being productive in things that matter most.
Yeah. And it's making that link and knowing what that foundation is that you have for showing up each day and what you actually want to achieve in life. I think that's really important to remember. Absolutely fascinating. So the biggest excuse / reason we hear that people don't write is because they always say they don't have enough time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard that a million times, not just in the writing book world, but in every walk of life. What do you normally say to people who say that I don't have time to analyze my habits. I don't have time to create new habits. Or
I don't have there's probably some really great comebacks to this, but I think people have to look at their own lives with compassion. And I look at other people with compassion. Everybody's doing the best they can. The thing that I would call out, and I call this out early in my book, Tiny Habits, is what you've been led to believe is often not accurate. The way you create habits is the traditional way is not the best way. It sets you up for failure. And so maybe you're thinking about what it means to write every day. Reevaluate that. What does that mean? And I love the 200 word a day challenge. You're being disruptive here with this. And I like that. And so just there's some assumptions we have built in around what it means to be a writer and writing every day and so on. And from my perspective, it's just scale it, make it really easy to do. Like make sure you have things set up so it's just, you don't have to put in any effort to get started. And then just lower the bar. And this goes for nutrition and exercise and stress reduction and relationships, all sorts of habits, including writing. Make the bar so low that you can just get over it with almost no motivation. And then when you want to do more, do more. When you want to do more than 200 words, great, knock it out of the park. But be consistent with that tiny version of the habit. And you will naturally find yourself doing more and more, just like a plant naturally grows. But then there's going to be times you can't, and that's fine. And don't get down on yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Have compassion. And so I guess the summary is question the assumptions you have in your mind, what it means to write every day or be a writer, and scale things back so it's super tiny and you can succeed every day, even in tiny ways, and have compassion. Nobody's perfect in this.
That's brilliant. And it's about getting those streaks rather than being perfect and being able to do something every single day.
Yeah. And there's really a sense of momentum. And I found this very much even before Tiny Habits in the mid 90s when I was writing my dissertation. And most doctoral students talk about the dissertation as just being this terrible experience. I had the insight somehow that it's just momentum. Just do something every day, even if it ends up being something that I have to just erase. Because what I found was if I took a couple days off or 3 days off, the dissertation got cold. And it was very hard to figure out, where am I? What do I need to do next? So it was just this moment. And I really thought of it, this momentum in a physics sense of the word. Just keep it going, even if it's just just so small, just keep it moving forward. And with that mentality, well, I remember times I'd come home late from a party. It was 12:30. I was exhausted. I hadn't written anything on my dissertation. I'd fire up my little Mac there in my studio apartment, and I would write something, even though I was exhausted, like a sentence or two, call it good, go to bed, wake up the next day and go, what was I thinking? But, it was somehow I had the insight of just keep it going. Just keep the momentum going. Even if your contribution tonight is terrible, you're keeping it going. And that matters.
You showed up, right? There was actually an interview we did with a best-selling author, Ben Aronovich, who said that when he doesn't write every day or doesn't try to write every day, he'd come back to a book, maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, and he said, and all the characters would have got bored and buggered off.
I love that. I love that. So,
isn't that great? Yeah. And it's the same when you read books. I find if I don't get into it, I read your book almost in one sitting, but most books, they'll sit on my bedside and I'll be dipping into them. And you always have to kind of rewind a few pages to try and remember what on earth was going on or what the last link was, to just try and get your brain in gear. And I think that's a kind of counter to what you just explained, which is why the momentum is so important, especially within writing. And
let me share another tip that is certainly a Tiny Habits kind of tip. And I don't know if somebody's shared this before, but I feel like, I sort of figured it out on my own. I'm sure other people have figured it out. What I do when I'm writing a big project is when I get to the end of the writing session, like I have to wrap up, I leave pieces undone things that are easily like concluded, or say, hey, check the headings or write the final few sentences here, which I could easily do, I don't do. And instead I make a list of do this, do this, do this. So in other words, what I'm creating for myself, and this doesn't take much, is I'm creating for myself an on-ramp that doesn't go up, but goes down. So the next day when I get back into the writing session, I just look at my undone tasks, which are really easy. And then I go down the on-ramp and I'm on my way. So you purposely design in the session before that you have something low-hanging fruit. So you just zoom down the on-ramp and then you're on your way.
Love it. And there's your momentum, right there. It's a great idea. This has been absolutely fascinating, BJ. And I would love to dissect a bit further about using tiny habits in the process of actually writing a book, because you've been through that process yourself, and there's many different ways to write a book. But I'm fascinated in what the kind of leading behavioral design scientist out there did to write his book and how that can help other people reach their aspiration of writing the book. So I'd like to wish you all the best with this incredible book that you put out there. I recommend everyone to rush out and get a copy. Tiny Habits. I believe it's available in Costco. Is that right, BJ?
As well as Costco's and airports and independent bookstores near you.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, and online.
And if you want to find out more about BJ's work, you're interested maybe in the Tiny Habits 5-day course that you can take for free, pop over to BJ's website. It's bjfogg.com, and BJ's also very active on Twitter at bjfogg, and that's Fogg. So thank you so much for your time, BJ. I appreciate absolutely everything, and in the middle of this big book tour, and your world is no doubt very busy. So we really appreciate you giving up some of your time today, and I look forward to chatting with you further.
Thank you, Mark.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book? Quitting the day job? Becoming a best-selling author? Since 2016, we've interviewed and studied the advice of over 500 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 1 billion books. And in the Bestseller Academy, we've incorporated powerful and proven strategies for success, inspiring fiction and non-fiction authors just like you to reach new heights and write their best book ever. Ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, coaching, and the most inspiring and exclusive community of like-minded writers? Well, your bestseller dreams are just a click away. Join us today at bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy.
Oh, you fanboy. You fanboyed hard there, didn't you, Mr. D?
It's one of the great things about doing a podcast is that because we've been doing this for 4 years, you actually get the opportunity to interview people you really are fascinated with. And we've got another interview coming up in a couple of weeks, similar to that. You can't really get from that interview just how much he's contributed to the world of behavioral science. He won't tell you this, but he's actually regarded as the world's leading behavioral scientist, which in our world today, where we all run on behavior, it's quite incredible. But yeah, it was an interesting chat. What did you pick up?
I thought it was really fascinating, and the thing I picked up on. Importantly was this thing where people say, look, I just don't have time. And I know we've heard that from our listeners, and we've kind of, there's a line in one of the Muppet albums where Miss Piggy says, make time, so we've said that to me. Oh, make the time, find 20 minutes a day. But he said, importantly, answer with compassion, lower the bar, do what you want to do. And this thing about do just 2 words, I did an eye roll when I heard that. I thought, oh, really? Just 2 words? What possible good could that possibly do? And then when I thought about it, I thought, actually, you know what? I have actually bloody done that. I have done that. I've had days. Yeah. I've had days where I've come down and thought, I'm not feeling it today. I can't do it. But I have written not 2 words, but I have written a paragraph and thought, sod it. That's it. I've done it. I'm now going to go and do something else. And you do have the satisfaction of knowing that you've done something, which comes to that point that he was talking about momentum, which is so important. He said, if you take the time off, the story goes cold and you lose momentum. That is so true. That is so true. So I try not to take a break. You know, you were talking at a big beginning of the show about how I've got so much on at the moment, and I am kind of blocking out my day hours at a time. So I do an hour of this, an hour of that, an hour of that, because I could easily spend 2 or 3 days just doing one thing and concentrating on that and nothing else. But I know that if I did that and then come back to those other projects, they've lost all their momentum. So if I do a little of them every day, if I block out an hour every day for each of these things, I keep the plate spinning on all of them, you know? He's absolutely right.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because it in some ways, many of our lives have now become this multifaceted life where we're no longer necessarily just, you know, doing one job with one company. I mean, even people now, everyone who's working from home during COVID, they're starting to realize like just how incredibly challenging it is to balance everything, because now the kids are at home, or you know, you're nearby your neighbors, your parents who pop in for a cuppa at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when you've got a project due. And so the reason why I love what BJ's talking about is, like you say, it's so, for me, it felt like when I first came across this research, I thought this feels so unnatural to lower the bar. Like for me, I'm always talking about shoot for the moon, you know, don't set your goals small, set them big. But what I understand is this idea of creating a habit. You have to write those 2 words. Everything about this, Mark, every single writing session that anyone ever does always starts with those 2 words. You know, it's always about getting in and starting the process. The actual challenge for most people is starting something. It's actually just, it's not that they don't want to do what they can't do. It's just, they just haven't started it. So it's about starting your writing and then be open to see whether it becomes a sentence, a paragraph, 200 words, a chapter, or 10,000 words if you really get stuck into it. It is interesting, isn't it? I think as well, it's kind of fascinating when you look at the science behind it as well, because he's used this in his own life a lot, but he's taught, I think he said something like 40, 50,000 students. And I actually went through his course, and that is great, because if you don't, you set goals to begin with for the week, and if you don't achieve them, the coach basically says, make it simpler, like keep breaking it down, and that's really where the magic happens.
That's actually very good writing advice as well. You know, if you're trying to carry the whole story around in your head, I mean, this is what's been coming out of the one-on-one conversations. A lot of people are trying to carry the weight of 80,000 words on their shoulder.
Yes.
When actually my advice to a lot of them is, you know, put that to one side. Just take out this one element, interrogate that one element, see if it works, see where the weak points are, that kind of thing. And they're finding that really helpful and useful, because that's one of the things I do. You can't, you know, juggle all of that. It's you sometimes need to take it apart, look at the components, and put it back together again. And it's reducing it down to its simplest moments.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. I think the reason why most people never start a book is the weight of that whole idea of the word book sounds so huge that's the reason I think 95% of people never even start those first 2 words of chapter 1. But actually, when you think about it, we don't actually write books. We write words, and those words become a book. We don't write the book itself. And I think if we can break away from that idea that we've got this mammoth kind of impossible task, lifelong project, as some people look at it, it almost breaks the shackles, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was, again, I'm not just plugging the Academy. I was talking to someone about this less than 2 hours ago, where we were talking about carrying the weight of a whole story. And I made the point, I said, look, we're all natural storytellers. It's something humanity has done since the dawn of time. We would sit around the fire and talk about the hunt or whatever happened to us today. And, you know, my parents, who left school when, you know, they have no higher education, left school when they were teenagers, the best storytellers I know, because they would come home and say, you will never guess what happened to me today. And we all have this instinct for storytelling. We can all do it. But very few of us can sit down and knock out 80, 90,000 words of story. That takes a particular skill set, but it's a skill set we all have if you just take it one story beat at a time. And that is, you know, you can sit down and outline 50,000 words if you want, Or you can take it one page at a time. What happens next? What happens next? What happens next? What's the most interesting thing that can happen next? And if you take it, we had, I've forgotten his name now, South African author who said, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah.
This is, it's the bit of ancient wisdom there with BJ's, up-to-date science. It's a truism. It's absolutely true.
Yeah, and we're so driven as well in society. We are driven about this idea of achieving big, and but it's so true. We've got to start small, and I do think that I wonder how many more books would be written if people were able to grasp that. I do think the idea of writing a book is that discipline that we need. I mean, that's why we've set the Academy up. It's a place where you can come in and learn that discipline if you struggle to write and finish the book. But I do think that that's a learned behavior. You're not born as someone who can just write a book. We're born as, like you say, storytellers. We always have stories, but we have to learn that process.
Yeah,
we have to learn that process. And so the habit side of things of what BJ's been talking about is really opening that door to the awareness of what we have to understand in terms of how we work. This is the thing. I always find this really fascinating. As a coach, I get to play with this every single day, but a lot of people spend very little time actually learning about how they work. Like the things that most people don't even, like they say 80% of what we did yesterday, we did today because of habits. But most of us don't ever stop and actually ask ourselves the question, well, what habits do I have? I did a habit audit recently where I just looked at habits that I do that don't help me, habits I do that do help me, habits I'd like to cement, and habits I'd like to try and create in the future. And you can do this through a habit audit and actually just take the time to stop, even if it's just one thing. Observe yourself as if you're a third person and go, oh, isn't it interesting how I always do that? And actually that's not the best way of doing it.
You should always be willing to relearn the way you do things. It's funny, since we sort of transitioned from summer into autumn here, my daily routine has I've rejiggled it. I've moved things around, just to help me get through the day, and it makes all the difference. Dion Mayer is that South African author.
Dion.
Apologies to Dion. He was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Do check that episode out.
Fantastic stuff. So, Mr. Stay, we've got some good news to share on social media this week.
Oh, it's just wonderful news. We first of all, we had a message from Annie O'Neill, who's part of our BXP team, who her book Miracle on Christmas Street got to #1, and we were like, Annie, congratulations. And she said, many thanks, Chief. Your podcast is one of the reasons I feel empowered to even try and get there.
Brilliant.
So that's brilliant. So thank you so much for that, Annie, and congratulations on Miracle on Christmas Street. Here we go, talking about habits. Jackie Kirkham, who's at Jackie Kirkham on Twitter, she's put hashtag Girly SWAT. She said, according to my spreadsheet, I just cracked 100,000 words for the year. I'm pretty allergic to word counting, but even I will permit myself a fist bump. Thank you, BXP 2020. This really works. So Jackie's been doing the 200 words a day thing, and she's got 100,000 words out of that. We also had a note from Amelia Vincent, who said over 105,000 words since I started this novel on the 10th of August, and the last two of which were the end. Now, you mentioned, if you're just going to write 2 words, the end are the best words you can write.
Exactly.
So the first draft of this novel is done. So congratulations to Jackie and Amelia there.
Absolutely. Well done to both of you. Amazingly inspiring. And hey, if you're sitting there listening to that and thinking, I wish that was me. That's what I hoped to do at the beginning. This is the time to do it. Plan now, 2021. Get those words and that word goal set now and get ready. Absolument. So thank you, folks, for listening. Come and get in touch on social media. We're on Facebook, Bestseller Experiment, Twitter and Instagram at BestsellerXP, or pop over to the website, bestsellerexperiment.com. There is a contact tab there. Drop us a line. We read all the emails. We reply to them, and we'll ask us questions, all sorts of stuff, and come and check out the Academy as well. Also, thanks to Dave and JD. Now, JD recently has been poorly with kidney stones. I've had a few kidney stones myself in the past. Oh boy, they are no fun whatsoever. But I'm glad to report JD is on the road to recovery. So get well soon, JD. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate and review on your podcatcher of choice. All those little stars and comments you give us make all the difference. Brilliant stuff. And if you've got a pen and paper handy, I'll quickly run through the the most important URLs, web addresses that you need. If you'd like to become a patron of this show, pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and join our incredible BXP team and get loads of other goodies. If you would like to join the 200 word a day challenge, you can do that by going to bestsellerexperiment.com and signing up there. So I hope everyone's had an incredible writing week this last week. I hope you have a wonderful writing week coming up with not too many crazy things going on. And I should also just say this, we should also always say this, we just hope everyone is doing really well during this challenging time, that everyone's safe and staying healthy. And please do drop us a note as well if you have any success stories. We always love to hear from you and read everything that comes through. Go to the contact form on the website. Thanks so much, Mr. Stay, and I look forward to chatting with you in 2 weeks when we have another exciting interview to get us ready for 2021.
So it's goodbye from Mark 1.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you did it, didn't you? There we go. Oh, my gosh, the universe just thrown me. And it's a goodbye from Mark 2. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Are you ready to transform your writing and your life? Join the 200 word challenge today. In just 5 days, learn to develop a lifelong writing habit with over 2 hours of free expert coaching and the encouragement of a vibrant community. This program has already changed the lives of thousands of writers like you. No matter how busy you are, this challenge will show you that with just 200 words a day, you can significantly boost your creativity, productivity, mental health, and confidence, propelling you towards the end. For the first time, receive comprehensive coaching and step-by-step guidance, all for free. Transform your writing habit and start your journey to become the writer you've always aspired to be. What are you waiting for? Sign up for free now at 200wordchallenge.com and make writing a part of your daily life for life.